My pleasure to introduce our next two speakers. It's Nikki and Alyssa from Colorado on daily conservation district calls, social distance, tree sales, remote district training events, and other best practices. So let me flash the presentation over to Alyssa, and who will take it from there. Alyssa, mic check. Alyssa and Nikki,
Good morning.
good morning.
Well, I can go ahead and get started if that works.
Hey, Alyssa, are you there? Nikki's there?
Um, I'm here. Can you see my screen okay?
Yes, it's coming through great. Thank you.
Alrighty.
Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Nikki Brinson. I'm the District Operation Manager with the Colorado State Conservation Board, and I am kind of the central hub of what goes out to the districts from our state office, statutory requirements, all the fun legal stuff that they truly enjoy receiving, usually come from my email. But I work closely with the regional field staff on their operations, how we can support what they're trying to do with the districts and conduct their normal business. So when this first broke out, our staff has always had weekly calls. We obviously increased those to more kind of on the fly, depending on what was going on and what was happening. And of course, like everyone else, we found a need that the districts were kind of in an information black hole, if you will. They were trying to find out what to do. They needed more guidance. They were asking for help. Another, deadlines were coming up. It's an election year for our districts, and that was another concern. They were running across statutory deadlines, which in Colorado, the statutory deadline they were concerned about was an audit, which could not be extended by a governor's executive order because the due date was in statute, and they couldn't figure out a way to cleanly do that. So it was quite interesting. So for 3 weeks, we had very short, concise daily teleconference calls with the districts. We actually used freeconferencecall.com. Like most other state agencies, we're broke too. So we use that one a lot for the districts and communications with them. And that way we could also kind of gauge the interest level based on how many calls we were getting to join that call. There we discussed any NRCS office updates, how they were handling it. We could get updated information from our state conservationist, and it would allow us a way to pass that information along to our districts directly. We also discussed open meeting requirements, and open meetings parts of it are tied into the Colorado Constitution, so the governor cannot do an executive order to adjust those. It's a gray area, and our districts have had to learn how to quickly do teleconference and webinars and pieces that they're allowed and not allowed to do under open meeting laws. So it's been a steep learning curve. A lot of districts did cancel their first month or two of meetings, but now they're trying to figure it out and get caught up with that. It was also a great opportunity to bring up continuity of operations plan. Our last big push was for those with the districts was during the last federal government shutdown. And this was just another good reason to remind them they should have some sort of continuity of operations and to see if we need to quickly develop one for that. We discussed the Families First Coronavirus Response Act like Washington. In Colorado, we cannot give legal advice or strict yes/no guidance to the conservation districts. It's more of a this is what we think this means, but consult your legal counsel type of answer. But we try to give them resources. So we created, thanks to Washington for some great ideas and also for great information sharing. Rachel Thieler on our team created a COVID webpage just for our districts that was very similar to what you saw of Washington's. It had templates for open meetings, posting teleconference notices for open meetings. We also linked directly to sources like the Federal Department of Labor. When they had webinars and teleconferences, we just try to point them to resources that could help them, along with the Colorado Department of Labor as well for anything that might be state specific. We also try to guide them through some statutory compliance and deadlines, how to do those remotely, how to get the right signatures, electronic signing, DocuSign. It was a steep learning curve for a lot of them. And again, broadband and internet connections always play a piece in rural areas. It was also a good opportunity for conservation districts to ask questions. Those were daily calls. There were a lot of questions. They seemed to have tapered down quite a bit. And in those calls, we made a specific point to really thank them for their continued service, remind them that we were here, they could get a hold of us, we were working for them and still trying to support them. So kind of giving them a good pat on the back and letting them know that they are appreciated, why they were kind of feeling like they were scrambling. The attendance on those seemed to kind of die down, as well as any notices or updates were kind of, holding steady. And I was pretty much repeating the same thing every day. So we decided to switch to more of weekly calls, pretty much the same content. These calls are less than half an hour. People jump on, they listen to it and get off. Our conservation districts have said that they really appreciate that. They're inundated right now with teleconferences and webinars, and they just want information if it's new and they want to move on, and they appreciate our short and concise piece of that. So we just try to keep it that same way. Sometimes they're even less than 10 minutes. We go through any updates that we have, any new resources coming up, how to handle oath of office now that the election was over this week, and then really ask them to share anything, questions. They're pretty quiet most of the time, but once in a while the question might come up and they might follow up with another district manager that's on the line. So that's been very helpful to create that support system. One thing that has been brought up too, that out of a question, is that they were really looking for guidance on how to navigate their tree sales. Most of those took place on NRCS property, and it was creating a bunch of questions. So our staff kind of took that on to see what we could help with and facilitate with that. And Alyssa is going to kind of go over those topics on how we transitioned that piece.
Okay. So as Nikki mentioned, in those calls, tree sales were a common question. I'm sure other states had a similar conundrum where this is the time of year where districts get trees from our Colorado State Forest Service and a few other distributors and sell them to landowners for conservation projects. And there was some confusion from districts on how to proceed and a lack of guidance from distributors. We found that the distributors, the Forest Service was floundering like most of us, and we're handling the tree sales on a case-to-case basis, and communication was sporadic and in-depth, but in a somewhat confusing way. And so we were asked to step in and see where we can help. And so we connected with NRCS to confirm usage of office parking lots to stage tree sales, because there was still some confusion about how the districts could use NRCS space and remain socially distant. And they reiterated that no NRCS vehicles may be used despite the pandemic. And so collaborating with NRCS, the Department of Agriculture, and the Colorado Association of Conservation Districts, we deduced 3 options for best tree sale practices and additional safety info. And so out of that, we came up with a few ideas to help districts stage tree sale events in a way that adhered to socially distant guidelines. And then due to the Colorado Department of Health and Environment's communication office, we were unable to distribute information. And so we relied on partners to distribute the info that we compiled. The state of Colorado wanted to keep communication regarding COVID centralized. And so we were asked to defer to them and defer to our partners. And so essentially we created a few resource materials and then just kept our name off of them. So we organized a teleconference. It was hosted by NRCS, but led by us. So NRCS had the call-in number, they distributed the information, but we sort of led the charge on the call in distributing the information that we compiled. And then we also distributed a one-pager, which I'll show you in a minute, with some information on how to proceed safely. And then we made direct contact with the Colorado State Forest Service. During that phone call teleconference that we had, the districts asked us to see if we could help them communicate with the State Forest Service because they were fairly confused on how to proceed. And so we reached out to the Forest Service and were trying to figure out their distribution issues and their plan for socially distant distribution. And then we urged them to communicate directly with the districts, right? Because we didn't want to play middleman between the Forest Service and the districts. So we just reached out to try and get their game plan, and then encouraged them and encouraged the districts to reach out directly. And then Cindy Lair, our program manager, picked up and delivered trees to hard to reach areas. So Cindy kind of stepped in and picked up some trees from the Forest Service because they were worried about having their staff deliver trees to parts of the state where they'd have to stay overnight. And so Cindy stepped in and made those deliveries herself, and it was just a move that helped the districts feel supported when the tree nursery was 8 hours across the state. They could still get the trees they needed to their landowners. And so here I have the one pager that we distributed, and I won't go into detail on this, but you'll note at the bottom we have the logos of DACD and NRCS, but we left our logo off of it. And then we provided 3 options: a drive-through pickup, a socially distant staged event, and a tree delivery where board supervisors would deliver the trees themselves. And we gave some ideas in that, and then some additional thoughts to help them remain safe. And if anyone is interested in this form, we're happy to distribute it afterwards. And so that's what we have for the tree sales. Ray also mentioned our remote district training event. I don't have a slide on that, but we planned a district manager training that then turned into a broad district training that would be statewide, and we were going to hold it in person in May or June of this year. And of course that got canceled, and so we are moving it to Zoom and proceeding a little differently, but we're still optimistic that it's going to be a great event. And we split it into 2 days because we wanted to have partners come and talk about their partnership opportunities and project opportunities, but you can only have someone sitting on a webinar for so long. And so we decided to split it into 2 webinars. We have our, district training event on one day, and then the next week we're having a partner-specific webinar where we'll bring on a bunch of different partners throughout the state and from other states to talk to districts about partnership and project opportunities. And so here's our contact information and our district operations site that Nikki mentioned with our updated information on COVID that we distribute to the districts.